Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody, whatever part of the world you're currently listening to our Face Economics podcast and Face Economics TV video blog. My name is Al Mina, concept author of Face Economics, the utilization of the social media platform in economic development worldwide. Today's February the 15th, just after the holiday of Valentine's Day, as I call it. It's not really a holiday, just, feels like it is a holiday just because how people operate. I'm always in awe and amused somewhat of, the Valentine's Day celebrations around the world. Um, it basically emphasizes how people operate, you know, when they are aware of what's going on around them. And, when people are in love, when they like each other, or if they have a crush on someone, their heightened, level of awareness is so obvious. So that kind of gives me, a segue somewhat, on what's currently happening around the world, current event wise, what's on the news in the US and what's being, discussed abroad because of the heightened sense of awareness of the public. Just like on a, Valentine's Day celebration, and you're basically, is looking for things that you like about someone. You're basically celebrating those attributes in a person. It's very similar in the world news, in politics, and economic development. You know, um, we look for things that we like and don't like on certain events that are happening around the world. So, with this said, I'm going to first start on things that I didn't quite like, especially with the last Munich Security Council meeting hosted in Germany, where Senator Sheehan and Senator Lindsey Graham, as well as NATO Secretary Rutte, was on a panel with a German diplomat talking about Ukraine, basically. So I went and kind of researched both Senator Lindsey Graham, which is a Republican, and Senator Sheehan's background, which is a Democrat, and Mark Rutte's, background, who was the former prime minister of the Netherlands. And in all three bios, I couldn't find any information on their previous experience in Eastern and Central Europe. No mention in their bios had they lived, worked, or have been exposed to Central and Eastern European affairs. Excuse me, prior to becoming elected officials. So they were on a platform at the Security Summit in Europe, in which they have no real credible expertise on the subject of war in the regions, especially Central and Eastern Europe. So that kind of sparked my interest in kind of researching more about the overall, decision making process of the people that organize the Security Council in Germany, on why they decided to invite, politicians to their event that have no prior experience other than talking about their opinions on what's going on in Ukraine. Neither Lindsey Graham nor Sheehan have lived or worked and operated in Eastern Europe or even in Ukraine. So I find that extremely baffling that they would opine and comment and, provide their opinion on an ongoing war, which neither one of them serve in the, military, that have been engaged in a war situation. On top of that, they were operating in a continent that they have no subject matter expertise in. So, and then I went ahead and looked on Mr. Rutte's background. He's never served in the military, but yet he's the secretary of NATO. Okay. And if you dig deeper, uh, there were the opposition parties in Germany that were very vocal against supporting the war in Ukraine and continue to fund Ukraine and provide them weapons that weren't invited to the Munich Security Summit. So the heightened, going back to Valentine's Day, the heightened sense of awareness wasn't there. It was a lump-sided event. Granted, they did manage to invite, individuals that were more balanced and were basically trying to de-escalate the war between Russia and Ukraine. From the U.S. mainly, the Trump administration sent over the vice president, and he has provided a fair and balanced approach to what's going on in the region. But yet he was met with a lot of hostility from various, military attaches that listened to his speech in Munich, as well as politicians. So I am kind of curious to know, why are people hostile towards an administration, the Trump administration, in which they were trying to do their best to stop the war, prevent additional lives being lost, and return the region back to normalcy. I don't understand why there are people pushing back. Peace should be the ultimate, reason for all these security meetings. Peace should be the ultimate reason for NATO to basically support and prevent war. Okay, support peace, prevent war. Okay, but yet it seems to me it's becoming the complete opposite of, you know, preventing war and supporting peace. It's like the other way around with NATO today. They're looking to engage into war situations and continue to precipitate a war condition and ignore peace. And they're pushing back against escalating this issue between Russia and Ukraine. So I find that extremely baffling, especially when there's been an ongoing war for the last 3 years now. Okay, folks. Yeah, so I just thought I'd kind of opine briefly on what I've noticed, because sometimes when politics is operating counterproductively, and people that you would think would know better, especially our politicians or decision makers, our elected representatives, would want to side with, less conflict, more peace and diplomacy. But it seems to me, listening to some of those panels that was put together in Munich, it seemed to me as if they're more interested in, escalating and continue to support a war condition that should have been a war issue to begin with. It could have been prevented years ago. But here we are today, 3 years ongoing, and thousands of Ukrainians are no longer with us. That goes also with the Russians, which they simply don't really want to continue to engage in a war. The Russian government has continuously stated that they're not interested in prolonging this war. They are not interested in engaging any NATO member countries. Excuse me, NATO member countries, folks. But yet, we're still trying to figure out a way to, stop and escalate this whole issue between Russia and Ukraine. So yeah, well, unfortunately, folks, when people grow up in an era where they saw a lot of conflict in the world, and brought that into today's reality. Some of our decision makers grew up during the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and they saw a lot of conflict. Some of them were already alive after World War II or during World War II, and they thought that's the only way to prevent, anybody that does have the same opinion as you from gaining power is by engaging in a war situation rather in diplomacy. It's just counterproductive. So I'm glad that the Trump administration managed to send a delegation that provided a fair and balanced approach to what's going on in Ukraine. Anyway, I really would like to implore everyone that's hearing my voice to continue to be vigilant, continue to pay attention. Your heightened sense of awareness should be always active, not just on Valentine's Day. Be very vigilant, because unfortunately, not all decision makers and elected officials that we have today are looking out for your best interests. Not all of them can make optimum decisions to de-escalate conflict. Not all of them understand the ramifications of their decisions. Some of these politicians, especially if they're, at a later years in their lives, they're not going to be around. They're not going to see, the effects of what they've created. Okay, folks. I hear people, especially in Europe, talking about what if 5 years, 6 years from now, Russia or, whoever it is would attack Europe, if there was no security guarantees and all that stuff. Look, folks, when people don't really want to engage in a war to begin with, the reason for that is because they've already been there, done that. And now they have a much better life. They have access to modern amenities. They're well educated today. They're more stable as a society. There are no oppressive regimes operating in countries today that was similar, or is similar as before. Everybody today are racing each other to the top economically. Their only prerogative and mission today, as I've been researching the world in terms of economic development, every single country on this planet wants to advance economically. I've yet to come across anyone, even prior rogue countries and what they used to call axis of evil, not one of them are looking to engage in any war conflict. And I've been paying attention to world affairs ever since I was in high school. So they're not interested in going into war unless they feel threatened and unless they're attacked, which they have all the sovereign right to do, to protect themselves, just like any other country. With this, folks, I'm going to try to make this podcast short for this evening. I'm thinking doing another one for tomorrow. There's quite a bit of stuff happening around the world. And I kind of want to keep you all posted on, certain conditions that could, disrupt markets, be, current events. But since most of these news and issues and subjects are being shared on social media, it kind of, falls under the umbrella of face economics, because anything that is shared via social media would qualify as a face economic subject, which is the utilization of the social media platform in economic development. So I try to do my best to pay attention. Obviously, I don't 100%, always get everything correctly. And please feel free to, correct me if you hear something that aren't accurate or consistent. Let me know, and I'll try to, correct those information. But, you know, day in, day out, I try to pay attention to, world news, politics, and economics, market conditions around the world. There are things that are more complex that, I try to kind of dissect and make it easy for, a common person to appreciate and reflect on. Um, and, sometimes that doesn't always come out correctly. So I want to make sure that you guys also would kind of partner with me and help correct any, inaccurate information or uh, information that could be, misleading in a way. So please let me know if anything that I say aren't 100% correct. Okay. So help me out sometimes if there's anything that I mentioned that you don't feel is correct. But I try to do my best to make sure that I interpret um, subjects and issues and topics as efficient and correctly as possible. So again, my name is Al Mina. I'm the Face Economics Concept author of Face Economics, the utilization of the social media platform in economic development. Oh, by the way, I just have been seeing our books, our book collections are now available at various public libraries throughout the country. Uh, and I'm truly, I'm thrilled to see that, people are now gravitating towards our content because the way that we write our books is to kind of, give you guys a flavor of, microeconomics, geopolitics, social, issues, current events. That is simple to understand. We don't really want to confuse you too much. We just want you to be aware of certain issues that are happening because nowadays people consume information via their social media platform. So we just kind of want to, help kind of declassify, if I can even put it that way, declassify the conditions of higher learning, making it more streamlined and easy to digest for a common person. Uh, but I've also written books pertaining to the evolution of the marketplace using various social media platform, like the book that I wrote recently in Social Media We Trust, talks about certain civil rights, human rights violations that have been taking place on social media. It talks about the abuse of power by decision makers that are, social media platform owners, the big giant social media platforms violating public trust. So that's written in my book, In Social Media We Trust. A matter of fact, I've just recently started a petition to hold Mr. Mark Zuckerberg accountable for violating public trust and letting party politics be an apparatus platform on his social media business environment. So a party platform basically monitoring and silencing people, and he was involved in silencing people. Very unethical type of conditions that have been happening on his platform. On top of that, he managed to silence a president that was in office. Mr. Trump, Mr. Trump's Facebook account was basically discontinued while Mr. Trump was still in office. And that was also the case with Twitter, where Mr. Trump's account was also discontinued. So yeah, read our book in Social Media We Trust, and it's mostly an expose of what the social media giants are doing in terms of abusing their power and authority behind the scenes, because there's no way for us to really hold them accountable, because there's no way for us to access these kinds of behind the scene type of activities. But they have been violating, on a regular basis, human rights and civil rights and our freedom of speech on their platform. So, tell your friends about our books in Social Media We Trust. And look, I'm trying to be balanced. I first written my first book face economics like it because I see the value in social media, especially for, economic development, social, interaction and awareness, adaptation, adaptation, should I say, to, certain ideas, concepts, and mentalities, and be exposed to other people's, point of view and worldview, culture, tradition, uh, so I was an advocate for the utilization of social media and economic development for years. I mean, almost 2 decades, or even more, if not. But yet, as I see the evolution of the social media platform, I also saw the destructive nature of it, specifically because of the decision makers that are basically trying to re-engineer society in which they have no prior experience, they have no credibility to try to influence society the way they want society to be influenced, and allowing party politics to basically disrupt social discourse, social interaction, freedom of choice and freedom of speech and expression. When party politics, organization does that, it becomes more of a dictatorship, authoritarian, tyrannical tyranny happening in a country, in a marketplace, because it's no longer, a free society. It's become more of, a dictatorship by the powerful. And so I try to keep up and pay attention carefully on these kinds of activities and social architecture strategy. With this said, folks, my name is Almin. I'm the concept author of Face Economics, the utilization of the social media platform in economic development. I think I'm going to try to finish off here now, and I'll also do another podcast tomorrow. I just thought I, bring up, the Munich Security Council meeting to your attention and let you all know that it took place in Germany, and the main subject was security. And that also it kind of trickled into artificial intelligence, geopolitics, certain foreign policies, and economic development in Europe. So I thought I kind of discuss some of the things that I've heard, during the panel events, and the overall, reason why they decided to put together such an event. Rita said, thank you so much for your time. Looking forward to our next discussion. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend. Take care. Bye-bye.